Yes, folks, it's great to have you here. Today we have another wonderful theory video. For all the beginners out there and for those who have always wondered, why is there actually a hole in the center of a polishing pad? Does it have anything to do with centering? Or is it that somehow heat is dissipated here or whatever? Why is there a hole in the center of the eccentric pads, especially the 125 and 150 sizes, but we also find it in many 75 pads? Because there are also pads without a hole. And these are primarily used with rotary polishing machines. Why is that? I want to show you this today with a small experiment and explain to you again why this hole is so important. Because if it is not there, it can lead to quite a few problems. Let's take a look now. Have fun. And for that, I brought you two pads. One polishing pad with a hole and one polishing pad without a hole. In terms of thickness, here, you can also see that when you compress them, they are quite similar, if not completely equal in terms of stability. No matter how you press here, you cannot compress a pad more or less. This means they are very, very similar in terms of foam stability. And now we are going to test this out thoroughly. What happens when we polish with an eccentric polishing machine using the pad and apply a strong load, and what happens when we really put a strong load on the pad? Now let's apply a medium polish to the surface and polish for a defined period of time. So, let's add a little more to it. I think we will really give it full power for about a minute. So now let's quickly measure the temperatures here. Then we have here 32 degrees, 35, 31, and in the outer area 29, 24, 25, 21 in the outer area, and in the middle area we have here 30, 28, 25, 22, 20. We see that the temperatures naturally cool down further over time. This means that heat accumulates in the center. Now we will repeat the same test with a polishing pad without a hole. And we are also going to another paint spot because it is still warm now. I will apply a bit more medium polish. So let's do it here as well. Let's spread out. And now we'll move a bit further to the right side and come over here. So, here we look again, and I believe you can already see the difference. In the center, we have 48 degrees Celsius, 43, 41, 41 at the edge, 33, 28, 23, cooling down further. So we have very, very clear differences, and you can also see it in the polish. What has happened now? Two phenomena. First, the polish accumulates due to the eccentric movement, always in the center of the polishing pad. You can also see here from the distribution that we initially spread it out nicely, but now the bulk of the polish is concentrated in the central area of the polishing pad. You can see it quite well. You can also see well with the polishing pad that it has nicely pulled inwards here. But depending on the structure of the pad, it varies greatly. Therefore, I don't have the same pads now, but the phenomenon is clearly visible here. Here, it is also distributed already, of course, in the center, but still quite evenly. Here on the pad, you can clearly see that everything is moving inward. What happens now when polish and heat move inward? Of course, here the center of the pad, which has cooled down again, is not only filled with polish. Not only does the polish accumulate in the center of the pad, but the heat also causes the polish to essentially bond with the foam structure. This means that heat can be dissipated even less effectively. Simply put, the pad becomes very, very warm in the center. Now I have only worked on the surface here for 1 minute, applying a bit of pressure as evenly as possible on both, and here in the center we also had different temperatures. However, we had significantly lower temperatures on this pad than on the other pad. So it's clearly visible. Here we had something around 48, 46 degrees, and here we were significantly lower. And that's simply because the pad can continuously dissipate heat through this center point, and due to the rotation of the pad, the heat is also transported away from here. This does not happen with this pad. Here, the heat concentrates in the middle and stays there. It cannot escape from here. It is held up by the support divider at the top, which allows a little to be released, but not as extremely down towards the surface. And that is why an extreme heat point accumulates here in the center. So I believe you have seen well where the differences lie, what happens when a polishing pad has a hole in the middle or when it does not have a hole. In cases of high cutting performance, under very high loads, and during very long polishing durations, I would always recommend choosing a pad that has a hole in the center, even at 75mm, because the pad can tend to behave that way. This applies not only here. I have swisher pads here, for example, but you can also include all other pads. If you have a hole in the middle of these pads, you simply have better heat dissipation in the center, and the pad can expand a bit internally instead of expanding upwards, because if you keep applying pressure, the load remains extremely high. At some point, the hook and loop fastener at the top can become so heated that the adhesive, and if the pad is not of very high quality, the adhesive is the first thing that simply dissolves. It simply becomes very soft, loses its adhesive power, and up here, the Velcro disc starts to detach from the foam. How is it now with a rotary polishing machine? In that case, the heat is distributed evenly across the pad, and you have no heat accumulation in the center. This is a typical eccentric phenomenon. Imagine it like a kind of vortex, like a kind of whirlwind, where everything gathers in the center, in the eye of the storm, so to speak. It is the same here with the eccentric polishing machines. Everything moves inward. Polish sticks to the center. The center can no longer release the air. Everything is full of polish residue. The heat comes. The heat cannot escape. The hot paint is underneath. Above is the smoothing plate, which naturally does not emit as much heat. It also does not have any active cooling or anything like that. However, there are plates that can do this really well. For example, on the DA15 and DA21 from Chemical Works, you have this active heat dissipation. These channels, this supports you even more, allowing you to use it for a longer time. Nevertheless, even when you use a pad without a hole in the center on these machines, you will eventually experience this extreme heat buildup. Above all, and now we come to the point, if you exaggerate it like I just did, and now you say, that's not how you polish permanently on one spot. That is absolutely correct. But what many people, including beginners, do is polish a surface, doing it nicely in one piece, like the whole door in one go, as well as they can. And then it is polished out. And after a short time, after about a minute, you move on to the next spot. The pad simply accumulates heat. The polish continues to accumulate more and more in the center, increasingly moving into that area. The pads are not being cleaned, and so on. And these are all points that eventually lead to the pad being unable to relieve itself thermally. It can no longer get rid of the heat. Everything is glued with polish, and when you keep working in this high pressure area with a very strong cut right from the start, and the surface gets very warm, the pad eventually says, you know what? Goodbye, I'm done. And that's why you should definitely look for pads here with a hole in them. And also, my tip is to go for 75mm. So here's a little experiment. You can see that this pad has already deformed to such an extent that it can't even return to its original shape. And everything is accumulating here in the center. These are the reasons why you should get a pad. You should look for one with a hole when working with an extender polishing machine. I hope that was illustrative. It was also clearly seen in the temperature trends. Towards the center, it increases massively, and all of this combined eventually leads to the pad saying, I can't take it anymore. Goodbye. And at this point, I say goodbye to you all. Until next time. We will also look at a few other theoretical topics in the coming days. I think it will be a very exciting thing. Yours, Sebastian. I look forward to a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. Ciao. Until next time.